Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program this evening. As usual, it promises to be an exciting time. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. I hope the winter is not dealing with you over there in London.
it's the storm that's coming overnight that we are looking out for now, because the directive from the Met Office is everybody should stay indoors tomorrow. So, as you say, sir, God help us so when the storm lands. It's meant to be one of the biggest in the last 30 years.
Okay.
So, fingers crossed, we will be here in the morning. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I wonder, sir, given the backdrop of the weather here in the UK and also parts of Europe as well, is how that would affect the whole Russia-Ukraine saga that is going on, because we expect that the developments there, it seemed to be moving like a yo-yo, sir. On the one hand, they said to us, Russia was pulling back the troops. NATO and the US has said, no, they're not pulling back the troops. And where do we go? Sir, where do we go from here? Everyone is blowing hot and cold.
I was hoping that you wouldn't start with Ukraine today, because I already have a headache just trying to follow the movements and the issues and the factors and who is doing what and for what purpose. You know, I've been a foreign affairs scholar or analyst or whatever you want to call me for 62 years. And I haven't come across an issue that has left me so baffled, so bewildered, so confused. Well, let's start with the good part. At least the two presidents, the two foreign ministers of the main players, the secretaries of state, the diplomats are all earning their salaries, having sleepless nights over this issue. At least they know now that, you know, Kennedy, during the Cuban crisis, used to say to members of his cabinet, whenever they finished for the day and they went home, he used to say to them on departure, make sure you hug your wives and your children tomorrow morning before you leave home, because we don't know what's going to happen. You may not have homes to go back to. And that was how dangerous that situation was. Here now, we've been told that Putin had short-range missiles, which under treaty had been banned from being deployed in Central Europe. That is moved, that it has those missiles installed with the range to, of course, I mean, given where the boundary of Russia is, it could hit any part of Europe with the short-range missile. He says he's moved troops back. And you know what? I believe him. What, you know, he's Machiavellian in what he's doing. And I think I I am now starting to know his game plan. If I need 150,000 troops to achieve an objective, I will first put 200,000 there. And then when the argument starts, I will start to move them back 10,000 at a time without diminishing my capability to achieve my objectives. And after a while, I'll be asking you for reciprocity. Aren't you also going to reciprocate? I've already moved 20,000 troops back. I've already moved 30,000 troops back, whereas I knew I never needed those troops in the first place. I think that's the game that is played, number one. Number two, trains that go west in the middle of the night can stop and start going east. Again, it was something General Washkoff, I believe, played during the first Gulf War against Iraq. Against Iraq? Yes. Saddam Hussein. Well, yes, against
Correct.
Iraq. He created this phantom movement of troops in the middle of the night after the Iraqis and the American troops had been looking at each other face to face. He now created a phantom army that he moved during the night in the other direction. The Iraqis picked up the noise, and they thought the Americans were moving their troops to a new location. And they now started to move their own troops towards the same location, only in early dawn for the General Schwarzkopf to now hit in their original position. So games being played, mind games being played. And you know, the generals need to be reading books, history books about the tactics of famous generals in famous wars. Having said that, I am glad that NATO is not buckling. That NATO is not buckling. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is to give your opponent a sign of weakening because you encourage him. So NATO has got to stand firm, and that is what they are doing. I have said it on this program once that my biggest fear is not that frontier between Ukraine and Russia. I'm not worried about that. The frontier I'm worried about is between Belarus and Poland. The Russians have moved their troops into Belarus and have moved to that frontier. Why am I worried about that? American troops and Russian troops are now starting to look at each other face to face. If a mistake happens and a bullet comes by accident and hits an American soldier, then the United States, not wanting to, has to retaliate. And that now becomes a war between Russia and the United States and NATO. That is the frontier that worries me. And I hope we will see some movement back by the Russians from that Belarusian frontier. That's the one that I will be looking out for.
So even this afternoon, the U.S. president is still insisting that over the next few days that we expect to see this challenge play out, where he says, according to him, he says there are all indications that Russia is going to invade Ukraine. You said just at the beginning that the headache of trying to decipher where we're going. But surely the US president must have some intel that's pointing to the fact that this invasion indeed is going to happen.
You are right. The American intelligence, British intelligence, satellite intelligence, human intelligence on the ground, all are being pulled together. There is still that unknown factor, which is which intelligence is meant to mislead. As I said, they are playing mind games. Putin is playing chess. And the United States and NATO must not play checkers. They also must play chess and try to read the mood, the behind movement. I'm not saying that the intelligence is not accurate. Oh, no. I mean, I'm not in a position. I'm sitting in my study here. I cannot be questioning the veracity of the intelligence of the American president or NATO or Putin. But don't also forget that intelligence may be manufactured to mislead, just to destabilize the other side. If you read the history of the Second World War, books that have been written, there were fake cables that were being sent, knowing that the other side was reading those fake cables, about intention, movement of troops, and what have you. So you have to factor that in, because even in the Security Council debate today, one of the points being made by the Russian ambassador was that you Americans are the purveyor of fake news. You said we will invade on Wednesday. Today is Thursday. We haven't invaded. In fact, we are pulling our troops back. We have been saying all along that our exercise will end on February 22nd. It's not February 22nd yet. So you are the one who has been alarmist, who is giving fake news. We have kept within the time. So it's a mind game that is being played. But this is with the lives of people. Look at I cannot interpret. It's going to need intelligence to interpret the attack on the nursery school today. Is that one of the false flag actions? The false flag action, and I'm not insulting the intelligence of our people, our participants, by defining what the false flag operation is. The false flag operation is when Soviet troops dress like Ukrainian troops and fire at either the Soviets, either the Russians, and this now gives Putin the opportunity to say we've been fired upon, we're only defending ourselves, even though it was done by Russian troops. This is something which people do opponents do to each other. Who fired rockets into the school of those children? We will know well, we will never know, because what you will get will be two different narratives: American narrative and, Ukrainian, Russian narratives. But why would the Americans keep being that specific about the certainty of an attack? I believe they are reading Russian probably messages between the Kremlin and the troops, and they're letting them know that they are reading it. And also, they are now playing mind games with the Russians. We know this, but you don't know how much more we know. And we are preparing our own action based on what we know. And if that, you will then get, generals on the Russian side saying, if they know, well, let's change our tactics, or let's step this down, and other kind of mind games that are being played in the Pentagon and in the Kremlin.
Thank you for that. Someone just put an interesting comment here on, I think this one is on YouTube, that says, Prof is more of a war general than a diplomatic guru tonight.
Just a strategist. Just a strategist.
But before we leave the Russia points, there is one significant thing that happened as well in the course of the week, and that is the visit by the Brazilian president to Russia, and also the timing of that, because to quote the Russians, the Kremlin released a statement saying that they had agreed deeper cooperation in energy and trade. And they also called Brazil. They said that they are bound by friendship and mutual understanding. What were they talking about when they say that, sir?
I don't know what they're talking about, because Brazil is firmly within the American sphere of influence in its geographical zone. So there cannot be any mutuality between Brazil and Russia. It also occurred to me that if both sides are looking for face-saving measures, it probably will be through the intervention of either the United Nations Secretary General, who has been quiet, and quite advisedly so, because the intervention must do with timing. Both sides must not be looking for an interlocutor, and then the UN Secretary General will not be amenable to intervention by him. Or a medium power country. You see, if the scheme that I tried to come up with when I was a minister about the concept of medium powers, which incidentally included Brazil, India, Nigeria, and other countries, Austria, that one felt had credibility in terms of their role in the global sector. Now, if that had matured and the presidents of, say, Brazil, India, and maybe Nigeria or if our president is not inclined, South Africa then came up with a plan, which they then tried to sell to Moscow and the United States. Let me again emphasize, at the right time, not when two boxers or two fighters are still in the process of removing their clothes. That's not the time you intervene. They are still going through the process of, I'm going to blow off your head today. Oh, yeah? Okay, you come and try it and so on. And then either after a few blows or by the time they then felt where they've asserted their manhood, then they are looking for people to step in between them. This is the Bolekaja tactics, but this is also what war games are all about. That didn't work. Now you're having a unilateral move by Brazil. It's not going to work. Brazil has that gravitas, but is not sufficient as the collective gravitas of the medium powers. That will have worked, but not an individual country, a medium power trying to serve as an interlocutor.
Thank you, sir. But, sir, at this stage, can diplomacy still avert a war?
Yes, diplomacy can still avert, but it has to, that intervention, it cannot, all right, let me try and be clear. Diplomacy will not work if it is perceived as Russia accepting NATO terms or NATO accepting Russian terms. No, because that is like defeat, humiliation. Diplomacy will work when both sides feel they have achieved limited, not maximum objectives, limited. Russia can legitimately say now that now our status is back as a world power. Look at all the people who have been coming to see me in the Kremlin. Look at the number of telephone calls between me and so far the greatest power in the world, President Biden. So Russia is back on the world stage. I have achieved my objective. The Americans can legitimately claim that they stopped the invasion of a friendly country, Ukraine, without changing their principles, which are, one, they cannot force Ukraine to abandon any objective of joining NATO, not this year, not next year, but when everybody else, when the smoke has calmed down and people are busy somewhere else. One. Two, we have rejected the moves by Russia to force us to go back to where the boundary of NATO was when the Soviet Union was still in existence. In other words, withdraw the membership of Latvia, withdraw the membership of Lithuania, a membership of Bulgaria, Poland, etc., etc. They also can, pull down the flag and claim victory. And on both sides, that will have been secured. There will now be that question as, what do you do with the Russian-speaking part of Ukraine? because that is a core issue. And to me, well, anyway, never mind where I came across it. But to me, I think that the Ukrainians themselves must accept that there will be a bridge between Western Europe and Russia, that there will not be a flashpoint where war can break out at any time. And they will do this by surprisingly restructuring Ukraine, so that the Russian-speaking parts and the Ukrainian-speaking parts are given autonomy. It's like now turning Ukraine into a federal country with a federal constitution, giving Russian-speaking parts who accepted Ukrainian, citizenship, and the Ukrainians themselves autonomy over local matters. The restructuring will be governed by subsidiarity, where local matters are dealt with by local authorities. At the center in Kiev will be a federal government that will be dealing with foreign policy, defense, and other ancillary matters. That way, you remove the internal irritants which lead the Russian-speaking people to talk about marginalization and bridge this fear between the two groups, and gives Kremlin an opportunity to say, we need to protect our people. If your people have autonomy and cultural exchanges, which will not be perceived as a threat by the central government, then that is where you start, to build this, those will be the blocks of the bridges. So democracy can still work at that point. But right now, no, I cannot guarantee it. People are still rather, they're still in the Muhammad Ali mood. You've got to wait until it is the Ali the poet rather than the Ali the boxer, whose syndrome will be operating between the Americans and the Russians.
Yes, sir. So earlier today, the Russians expelled the number 2 American in the mission there, and they said the Americans have said, "Look, this was an unprovoked move," and Russia is saying, "No, we also are reciprocating based on what you Americans have did." It feels sad to me, and I think you're somewhat agreeing with that it looks like the diplomatic channels are breaking down, and it almost feels as if war is inevitable in this case, as we see it happening. Would you expect other countries to begin to expel Russian diplomats as well, if this was to break down further?
Well, unfortunately, there is reciprocity in diplomatic relations. You expel my diplomat, I am under an obligation to expel your own diplomat. And then honor is served. Though you cannot expel my man or my woman, and you expect me to overlook that. So America is under an obligation to retaliate. But you often notice that once they have done the one-on-one, they stop there. if you look at the history of expulsion of diplomacy, of diplomats, it has a classic moves of their own, and honor must be preserved by having, that equality. You cannot expel my number 2, and then I will expel your number 4. No, grade by grade. So, and since it's only the Americans they did it to, would other NATO members now think that that expulsion by Russia comes under Article 5 of the NATO treaty, which says an attack on one member of NATO is an attack on all of them. And therefore, they also must retaliate to what is this diplomatic attack. It's possible. So these are the kind of things that keep diplomats awake all night. I don't have to do their job for them. They are the ones earning the salary. They don't share the salary with me. So let them stay awake all night arguing among themselves as to whether it's only America that should expel the Russian diplomat or all NATO members, and see where we go from there.
One other point, sir, when we look at some of the other countries, quite a few have been moving troops around. But one particular one is Germany. Germany has also just recently been moving troops amid all the tensions that are going on. And someone is asking a question here on YouTube here, saying, is it not correct, as it is discussed in some quarters, that Germany is the target of Russia in the planned attack of Ukraine? Do you see that perspective at all? And why would Germany be a target?
No. I wouldn't put it that way. There is a German factor to what is going on over Ukraine. Some have argued succinctly too that Ukraine is just a bystander in this matter. That actually this matter is between Russia and the United States over that gas pipeline that is going into Germany. That Americans are determined to stop that pipeline, which has been completed, is just to be switched on. But that Americans are determined that it will not be switched on, because if it does, it increases Russian leverage, not only over Germany itself, but over the whole of Western Europe, who will now be so dependent on that gas supply. And if it works, then other trade links will follow. If that works, other links become part of it, such that the influential power in Europe, it's not France, it's not even Germany, it will be Russia. And America is determined that that will not happen. And that is why the United States is now determined to use the Ukrainian issue as the leverage to pressure Germany into not ever allowing that gas pipeline to work. So I wouldn't say that it is that the issue in Ukraine is between Russia and Germany is still between Russia and the United States, but over that Russian gas pipeline. And this, let me make an aside comment now. This is why the uncertainties in global politics is why countries who have things to offer should always put themselves in a state of preparedness to take advantage of global development. What do I mean? If you're a gas producing nation, say in Africa, and you know the people we are talking about, this is the time when you will have stepped in to offer Europe, so many tons of LNG, the liquefied natural gas. By now, you should have, ships anchored where you have stored those gas, the gas you produce, and now you will be offering it. Of course, if there is no problem, well, the gas doesn't deteriorate, you still sign agreements. But when you have governments who are in a permanent state of reactivity, they react. They never take the initiative. Now that there's going to be a scarcity of gas, the gas is still in the ground. Before they pump it, refine, and start shipping it, probably the matter is over. So I believe that the core issue is that Nostrum number 2, is that what you call it? Something like
that. Yeah, they call it Nord 2.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Let us move to a point that we haven't addressed on this program before, and let's go to Canada. And for almost 3 weeks now, if not more, we've had the so-called Freedom Convoy, and we're seeing the Canadian government, the Prime Minister, really, President, saying that, look, I need extra powers to disperse the crowd. This is now starting to become a major economic disaster for the nation and blocking access to the United States. How should Canada play their cards on what is going on now, sir?
Well, it's not really Canada, it's the Canadian government. How does it play its hands? And this is one of the syndromes of democracy. Because if the government anticipating this moves too fast, there will be people in Canada who will say you didn't give peace a chance. Maybe these people just wanted to come for 1 or 2 days, and then they will go back. Instead, you went after a fly with a sledgehammer. But there will be others who will say, good, you anticipate and got rid of them. But if you then wait until the damage starts being obvious, then they start accusing the government of weakness. You just sat there and saw this business being destroyed. Why were you voted in the office in the first place if you are not capable of? So you've got to, Trudeau had to play it right that Canadians themselves were starting to now move towards enough is enough. We've had enough of these people. And they came up with, they were getting funds from abroad, right-wing elements in the United States now saw it as a political issue and this and that. He has resisted, and that is Trudeau, the prime minister, has resisted calling out the armed forces because, you know, the vision of Canadian troops and boots on the ground in Ottawa, in Montreal, in Windsor, with guns trained on, because there were some Canadian citizens with them, you know, trained on Canadian citizens, may again turn off some Canadians who will say this is unacceptable. So he's using the police, and so far, so good. However, I must say here and now that excesses of freedom must never be tolerated. Your right to stretch your hand stops where my nose begins. Your right to stretch your hand never includes landing a blow on my face. That is an assault. That's no longer an exercise of human rights. No matter how lawful your cause is, it must not include devastating consequences on your neighbors, on the society. Let me qualify that before I am taking on. If you are fighting against an injustice, then visiting inconveniences on your neighbor may actually awaken him to the fact that that the society was a society of injustices, a society that was perpetrating evil against not you as an individual, but against a group. Because I'm emphasizing this, but that was what Martin Luther King human rights marches took vision to the evil that was being perpetrated against Blacks in the United States, even if it meant blocking roads. It was justified, but he was prepared to go to jail. And he said so, if you break the law, even if it's for a good cause, be prepared to go to jail, because that will even further awaken the consciousness of your fellow citizens that, wait a minute, you mean they really believe so much in their cause, they are ready to go to jail, but not like these people who were threatening, they blowing horns all through the night, babies couldn't sleep. No, you can't do that. So it's the government is under an obligation to find the right balance. And on this issue of vaccine, I think each one of us just has to take a stand, a position. I have the right not to be vaccinated if I don't want to. But I don't have a right then to enter a plane and infect all the people, or most of the people in that plane, whether they've been vaccinated or not. That is not a lawful exercise of my right. I know that in law, it's against the law to commit suicide. So actually, if I refuse to be vaccinated, and the majority of medical opinion is that that will kill me, then actually you should put me on trial for wanting to commit suicide. But let me even grant that if I want to commit suicide, all right, let me commit suicide, but I don't have the right to murder people. And I think refusing to get that vaccine and yet not isolating myself, but wanting to mix with people, whether in offices, on the plane, in the theater, in cinemas, whether should amount to wanting to commit murder. It is exercise of my right to the detriment of the right of other people. And so the government, they must find a balance. Having said that, let me end with one more factor, because I have heard people trying to equate what the truckers did and the way the press dealt with the issue of the government reaction. Definitely the press was on the side of government. They didn't come straight out to say that, but they were on the side of government. The way they presented their news, they were not on the side of the truckers at all. But the reason that they were on the side of government was that they were dealing with responsible and responsive governments. They were not dealing with government of kleptomaniacs. They were not dealing with government who were busy looting the treasury of the Commonwealth to their own personal and individual benefits, while the young people who were on the street were demonstrating against this great injustice. The reason why often the press is on the side of youth demonstration is actually because it is often more a condemnation of the government they are demonstrating against. But in this case, you cannot say you are condemning Trudeau, or you are condemning, this thing was starting to spread all around the world. No, you couldn't say that. They were responsible governments trying to do their best, under very difficult circumstances. But when you come to medium power countries or low income countries, and you have presidents and ministers and members of National Assembly loading their pockets while unemployment rate in the youth is very high, no health facilities, blah, blah, blah. If students or the youth demonstrate, well, the media can also read between what is called for and what is uncalled for. And I think that is what makes a distinction between the way the press reacted to the truckers and the way the press reacted to the EndSARS movement.
Thank you for that, sir. Let's go. I think we still have time to pick one or two more questions. I want to go to Afghanistan. Some weeks, about a month or so back, we talked about the fact that the US government had given access to funds, provided those funds were being used for humanitarian purposes. And we know that the Afghans were also a little vocal at the United Nations meeting that they attended. But now, over the last week, into this week, they're now holding a meeting in Doha. And this time, they're not only talking to representatives of Gulf countries, they're also talking with Islamic scholars, people members of the Council of Islamic Scholars, and other diplomatic counterparts in that place, including European diplomats. What do you have to say about how the Taliban is playing their diplomacy? They seem to be making significant headway in what they're doing. What is your view on that, sir?
Well, I think the Taliban has come to the conclusion that even if it is for public relation purposes, they have to change their posture on issues dealing with women education, girls education, women employment in government offices. You know, the socio-economic areas where they seem to have been stuck in, you know, misogynists, anti-feminist, and anti-children culture. And that is the only way they are going to survive. So, number one, I would say the West made the first move in releasing, as you rightly pointed out in your intro, those funds. And even this week, the Americans say, okay, the funds of Afghanistan and the central bank, they're going to, I think, release half of it, while they keep the other half because of the litigation going on in the US. By having this meeting in a liberal Islamic country like Doha, it allows, first of all, it allows them to experience what it is to live in a different Islamic country than what they experienced in Pakistan, where they were domiciled and where they were trained and where they were indoctrinated. And it allows them to see a modern Islamic country. The Council of Ulamas also now has the opportunity to interpret the Quran to them in a way that will make the Taliban less abrasive in their behavior internally and externally, without changing the words of the Quran. But look at others, look at other countries, look at, go to our hospitals here and see women doctors treating men. And I mean, if a pregnant woman wants to have a baby, comes into the hospital, and you say she cannot be attended to because there is no female doctor, to the detriment of the life of the oncoming baby and the life of the mother. Is that what the Quran says? I'm sure they will find a saying by the Prophet that says this is not acceptable. So the Taliban needs that Council of Ulama because they don't have to listen to Washington. They are now listening to people of their faith, and they need that. And I think this is, so we have seen, you know, a choreographed step-by-step engagement between the Taliban and the world. And this could only be to the benefit of Afghanistan itself.
Thank you, sir. I want to put one question to you. I would have drilled into that a little bit more, but I want to put one question to you because we've only got about 2 minutes left. And that is the announcement that the EU was going to be investing just under €1 billion in Nigeria's digital economy. And that is helping some of our tech companies to grow in Nigeria and giving them grants and in some cases loans to help them to develop. What is your take on that, sir?
Well, couple that with the EU summit going on in Brussels right now. Africa, the mode of engagement of Africa with the rest of the world is becoming more complex and hopefully more beneficial to Africa. Some of these things are designed to make sure that China does not have a monopoly over African future development. That's one. Number two, you'll notice that the funds being promised actually is going into the private sector, into the young technological gigs and their, because even I think some time ago, the United States private investment sector did say Nigeria had the fastest growing digital, new things springing up in the digital area. Not controlled by government. That is now outside the control of government. Of course, government will never keep the funds completely off it. You have to get a license, you have to sign this, sign that, and what have you. But the young people who are the driving force behind this have been able to cope with government interference. And to me, it's instructive that that is the area they picked. Before, they will talk about infrastructure. When the infrastructure is totally under the control of government, and funds then devoted there never really achieve its purpose because there are drainages all along the way, whereas with this, it is under the control of the private sector. And it's to be welcome. It's to be welcome.
Thank you very much for this evening, sir. There's a question here, but I think you've already addressed this one. And this is just someone saying that, do you still believe that Russia will not find a way to, will not find an excuse to invade Ukraine? I think you've touched it. So for the person asking that question, if you just go back a little bit in the program, I think Prof has already addressed that. In short,
Russia will still pay heavy price. It will, let us not deceive ourselves, it will pay heavy price. Right now, the only people who I see as being beneficial of this crisis are the oil producers. With the rate the oil price is shooting up, and if they have any brains at all, they will use that to increase their foreign exchange reserves. But there is no way an invasion of even 1 inch of Ukraine will not lead to economic disaster. Really, not just for Russia, for the whole of Europe and the United States, because international trade is already so hooked up. It will be disastrous. It will be.
On that note, we end the program for this evening. We will be back same time next week, and we hope that the storm approaching the UK will not cause much damage this time around. But thank you very much for this evening, sir. And to our viewers, thank you for being there. Thank you for the questions and the comments on YouTube there. See you next week. Good night, sir.
Good night.